Hello everyone, it's Marion again from Wool Thread Paint, and welcome to my studio on a very wet and rainy morning. You might even hear the rain drumming on the windows above my head. Today's tutorial is to show you how to make this square, and this is part of section 1 of the seed packet blanket, my new design for 2024. The blanket has 36 of these squares to start with, and they're all different colours. And yeah, so the tutorial today is to show you how to make the very first one. So this one is not the colourway of the first one. This was a sample I made earlier, but I just wanted to let you see what the square looks like. So it's a very simple flower in the centre of a granny square. Okay, I'm going to put this to one side and we'll make a start. Now the yarns I'm using are Yarnsmiths Pebble Haze. I don't have the colours yet because I haven't committed them to memory, but they will all be listed in the pattern. I just think of them in terms of colour, basically. So to me, this is a sort of biscuit colour, a violet colour, pale blue, and a sort of plum colour. But that is not the true names of the shades. But I'm working with 4 colours, and I'll take the first one, which is this biscuity colour, put the others out the way. This is a DK weight, which is light worsted if you're in the US. And I'm working with my trusty 4mm crochet hook, which is a size G. Of course, I've also got my sharp scissors and my tapestry needle, which is a size 18 tapestry needle for sewing in the ends at the end afterwards. Right, let's make a start. The first part starts with a chain 4 circle. So I've attached my yarn to my hook with a slip knot, and I'm going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4. So you get a sort of chain tail, if you like. But we're going to turn this chain of 4 into a circle by going into the very first chain, putting the hook in, putting the yarn over, making a slip stitch, in other words. So we're going to pull it through that first chain and also through the loop that's on the hook. And that turns the chain 4 into a circle with a definite hole in the middle, which is where we're going to be putting all the stitches for round 1. So to start round 1, I'm going to chain 2. Now that chain 2 is going to be a stitch, classed as a stitch, classed as a treble crochet stitch. And here I'm just going to say that I'm using UK terms throughout. If you're in the US, this would be a double crochet, remember, but I'm using treble crochet. I'm going to use the UK terms throughout this tutorial. So I've chained 2, which is the equivalent of my very first treble crochet stitch. And I want to have a total of 12 stitches in round 1. With this being classed as the first treble, there's another 11. So to make a treble stitch, it's yarn over, put your hook into that hole in the middle, and pull yarn over and pull your yarn through so that you've got 3 loops sitting on your hook. Then you want to yarn over your hook again and pull it through the first 2 loops. And you've got 2 loops left in the hook. So yarn over again and pull through those 2 loops, and that's your treble crochet stitch. I'll do that once more. Yarn over, put your hook in, pull up your loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over and pull through the last 2. So that's 2 treble crochets, and I've got 11 to make, so there's 9 more. So that's another 1, 2 coming up, now just before I close this up and finish off round 1, I'm just going to double check how many stitches I have. But it's very important that we have the correct number, because otherwise the pattern further on is thrown out. So I'm going to count my chain 2 as number 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 altogether. So everything's good, and I can finish off round 1. So all you need to do to finish off round 1 is find the top of your very first chain 2, put your hook in it, pull the loop through and through your last stitch, and that closes it off. Now this is the end of this yarn. We're going to be changing colour after every round, so I'm just going to pull that through the loop to fasten it. And that is round 1. Now round 2 is going to be worked on the same side. Now I'm saying I'll be talking about sides because if you know any of my other patterns, excuse me, you'll know that when I'm doing a granny square, I turn my square over after every round, and that keeps the balance right and stops the crochet from going squint. But in this particular design, I'm only going to be changing the sides after certain rounds. So you need to keep an eye on that in the pattern. And as I'm talking you through this tutorial. So for round 2, we're going to keep on the same side, and we're going to start pushing your hook in between 2 of those long stitches, not into the top of the stitch, but in between the stitches. Let's see if I can keep this in camera. I tend to avoid starting at a point where I started and stopped the last round, so I'm just going to go into any gap between those stitches and attach my next colour, which is this nice violet colour. If you're wondering about this new yarn, it's a mixture of mostly cotton, I think it's about 63% cotton, something like that, and 37% acrylic. And it's got this lovely kind of watercolour look to it, where the colour is, what would you say, it's mixed with white to give it a mottled effect. Okay, so I've attached my yarn, and I'm going to chain 4 this time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the equivalent of, let's say, the first 2 chains are the equivalent of a treble crochet stitch, and then the next 2 chains are the equivalent of the chain space that you'll find as you work round. So this is just for the very first stitch. And then I'm going to yarn over and go into the very next space between the stitches and make a treble crochet stitch. So you can see that you've got quite a gap between the stitches because of that chain 2 space. I'm going to chain 2 once more, yarn over, go into the next space between the stitches and make another treble. And that's all you need to do. It's just treble 1 and chain 2. So there's my treble 1 and chain 2. So I will work my way around this circle, and I'll come back when I'm just about finished round 2. So there we have round 2 completed. I've just got to, or at least almost completed. I've just done my last treble, so all I have to do is chain 2 and then find the top of the first chain 2. So we did chain 4, but we're going into the second chain and slip stitching to close off the round. Cut the yarn and pull it through. So that is round 2. Now I look on this as being the center of a flower and maybe the stamens of the flower, and now it's time to do the petals of the flower. And in this case we're going to turn the circle over to its reverse side to do this round. And there's a reason for that, which you will see when we start working. Now this is going to be a round of bobble stitches, and they're going to work into each of those large chain spaces, so it's very easy to see where to go. As usual, I recommend that we don't start in the same place we finished. So for round 3, I'm just going to put my hook into one of the large chain spaces and attach my yarn. And then chain 2 as usual. I always chain 2 when I'm doing the equivalent of a treble crochet. Some people choose to chain 3, but it's just my preference. I prefer chain 2. So I'm going to chain 2, and that's the equivalent of my first treble crochet stitch. And then I'm going to start the next stitch into the same chain space, and it's the beginning of a treble crochet. So yarn over, put your hook into the space, yarn over and pull through the loop, and you've got 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2, but don't pull through the last 2. Leave these on the hook. Yarn over again and go back into the very same space, pull up your loop, and you've got 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 again, leaving 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go back into the same space, yarn over, pull up your loop, yarn over, and again pull through the very first 2 loops. We've now got 4 loops on the hook, and you can see that there are 4 stitches below these loops. Yarn over again, into the same space, pull up the loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And now I've got 5 stitches and 5 loops. I'm going to finish off this bobble stitch by yarning over and pulling through all those loops on the hook, and that draws it together into a petal shape, and then just anchor it by making a chain stitch. So that's all we need to do in each of these spaces all around. The first one is very slightly different from all the others because of this chain 2. So I'll do the next one and let you see it. Before we move on to the next one, put in 2 more chain 2 or 2 more chains to give us the space to move on to the next one. So in actual fact, you've done 3 chains after the bobble stitch. So it's yarn over. Now this is slightly different because we don't have the chain 2. So it's yarn over, insert your hook, pull up your loop as usual, yarn over and pull through the first 2. Now what you can see here is, unlike this one, we've got 1 stitch made, but we've got 2 loops on the hook. Don't worry about that. Yarn over, put your hook in, pull up your loop, yarn over and pull through the first 2. Now we've done, what we're wanting to do is have 5 stitches in this space. So we've only done 2 so far. So we need to do another one and pull through the first 2. And another one and pull through the first 2. And another one and pull through the first 2. Now you can see that we've got the 5 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but because we had our chain 2 stitch from the space that we created, we've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on the hook. So there's only in the first one do you have the 5 loops on your hook. Every bobble stitch from now on going round the circle has 6 loops when it's time to pull through all of these loops. And then 1 to hold it, 1, 2 to make a space, so that's 3 chains. And once more, I'll do it a little bit faster, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there are 6 loops on the hook. Yarn over, pull through all those 6 loops and chain 1, 2, 3. And that's your bobble stitch. And the reason in fact, what I'll do is I'll work all the way around and then I'll come back and let you see the end of round 3. Now I've gone all the way around with my bobble stitches, and I'm just about to finish the round. Of course, I've just finished my last bobble stitch, so I've got my 3 chains to make. So this one is the one that anchors it, and then 1, 2. And then just find the top of your first chain 2 or thereabouts. Sometimes it's difficult to see it, and as long as you can pick up 2 loops and pull through your yarn and pull through, you're good to go. And you can cut the yarn now, and I'm going to show you why I worked this on the reverse side. And that's because the majority of the yarn on a bobble stitch goes to the back. So if you look at this, this was the right side of the bobble stitch. It's very flat, but when you turn it over to the wrong side, there's definitely a raised effect, and that's what we want to have on the front of our blanket. I'll pull this back and you can see how it's very flat on that side but raised on this side. So this will be classed as the front of the square, but just to confuse the issue, this was the way we did the bobble stitch. And for round 4, we're going to stay on this side for round 4 and take our next colour. So far we've only turned it when we were about to start the bobble stitch. We aren't turning it to do this next round. And this round is where we square off this circle, turn it into a granny square. So again, as usual, I'm going to start in a space, and I'm going to keep away from where I started and stopped the previous round. So attach the yarn. This is the plum colour I'm using now. And we're working with clusters of 3 stitches, granny stitches, to make this squared off round. Chain 2 because it's a treble crochet stitch, and then put 2 more treble crochets into that same space, and that is going to eventually become a corner. It's only half of the corner for the moment, but by the time we've worked all round, we can finish that off and turn it into a complete corner. And then for the next 2 spaces, I'm going to make a slightly smaller stitch. That was a treble crochet. For these 2 spaces, I'm going to put 3 half treble crochets, half double if you're in the US. So to make a half treble crochet, yarn over, put your hook straight into the next space, pull up your loop, yarn over, and this time just pull through all the 3 loops that are on the hook. And that's a half treble stitch. And you can see the treble crochet stitch and the half treble crochet stitch are quite distinctly different in size. And that's what we need to do to make this into a straight line. So that's another one to go in, yarn over, go into the space, pull up the loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Yarn over, go into the space, it's the same space, pull up your loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So you've got 3 half trebles in that space, and you can see the line straightening off. So I've got another cluster of 3 half trebles to put in. 1, 2, 3. And then we're on to the corner. Actually, what I didn't say at the end of round 3 was to just double check that you've got 12 bobble stitches. It's very important that you have your 12 bobble stitches. Otherwise, your squared off round won't fit. So we're on to the corner now. So that is treble again, rather than half treble. That's 1, 2, 3 trebles. And then we're going to chain 2. That chain 2 creates the right angle. And then 3 more trebles in that same space. And I'll show you what that looks like. 2, 3. And you can see that that chain 2 has given you a nice sharp right angle. And on we go with 3 half trebles in the next space. Making it the smaller stitch, and 3 half trebles in the next space. 1, 2, 3. And then back to a corner. We always know that we're going to be doing a corner because if you think about it, you have 12 spaces between these blue bobble stitches where you're going to be putting 4 corners, which you subtract that from 12, you'll get 8 left, and you have to divide that 8 by 4 because we're going to have 4 sides. So that means that's the kind of maths for making this into a square. Between each corner there are 2 clusters of half trebles. So we've done our 2 clusters, so it's time to make another corner. One, 2 to make the right angle, and 3 trebles. And there is our second corner, and you can really see the square beginning to form. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue round as usual, my 2 clusters of 3 half trebles, my next corner, 2 clusters of 3 half trebles, and then I'll come back to finish off the first and last corner. So there's the square of round 4, almost finished. I just want to point out this cluster here, which was the very first cluster we made in round 3, and that was the one that had the chain 2 to start it. It does, as you're coming around with your round 4, it does feel a bit wider than the others because of this chain 2, and the way to just cinch it in a little bit is to be a little bit, I always just try to be a little bit firmer with my tension as I'm going from this half treble cluster to this one. It just depends where your square will end up, because I don't dictate where you start, obviously. It could be that this is on a corner. It just means the same thing. If you're going from one cluster to the next, just be quite firm with your tension, and it helps to pull that very first bobble together. And actually, when you've done all your bobbles, they are indistinguishable anyway once you've got the rest round. I've got others sitting off camera here that I was going to show you, but I'll not complicate things any further. So anyway, we've gone all the way around our square, and we're back to this corner where we did the very first half of it, and we've got to finish that corner off. So it's just 3 trebles, 1, 2, 3, and then chain 2 and slip stitch into that very first, the top of that first chain 2, and pull through. This time I'm not going to finish off my yarn because we're going to do another round in the same colour. So at this point we're just going to leave the yarn and we're going to move on to the next round, which is round 5. Now there's a story behind round 5. This is my very first square, and this one is the only one that I'm going to make completely. So I'm going to make a round 5, so it will look like this and finished off. Every other square that you will make for this blanket, you will be making a joining stitch with your round 5. So you'll be doing your round 5, but you'll be joining it to the neighbour at the same time. Obviously, when you've got their very first square, you don't have a neighbour. So this is the only one that we will make the complete round 5. I'll have a separate video which will explain to you how to do the join as you go. I'm going to be using different squares for that. So I'm going to be using plain squares out of my collection, just to show you how to do the join as you go, but the process will be exactly the same. So for round 5 of square number 1 only, we're going to chain 2 and then turn it. Now we're going to work around this circumference or this outside with treble clusters, and where our chain 2 has landed is on the extreme right of that corner space. So I'm going to make this corner space in its entirety for the first one. The chain 2 counts as the first treble, so there's another 2 trebles to go, and then chain 2 and 3 trebles to go into that corner, and that makes a complete corner, which you will need to remember when you come all the way round that you've already done the whole corner. And I'll show you when I do come round what that looks like. But that is your first corner. And I didn't explain, but I have turned the square over, so this is now right side up. Our joining stitch will always be done on the right, so this is the front of this round, that's the back of that round, the back of that round, and the front of those 2 rounds. So first corner complete, into the next space, and this time instead of doing a half treble, we're going to do full trebles. We don't need to shape it for this round, so we're making treble stitches in each cluster. We have 3 clusters now between each corner because the square grows each time you work around it. So that's one more set of 3 trebles in this side before we get to the corner. And then 1, 2, 3. And that's the beginning of my second corner. At this point, just bear in mind, when you're doing any following on squares after the first one, this is how much you will do of round 5 before you start the join. So just remember that when you're making round 5 of your subsequent squares, do your complete corner, 1, 2, 3 clusters of 3 trebles, and only half of the second corner before we start the join, and the other video will show you what to do. But for this first square, chain 2 and 3 half trebles. There we go. And all you need to do is work all the way around your square, 3 trebles in each of these 3 spaces, 3 trebles, chain 2, 3 trebles, all the way round, and I'll come back when I've got to this point to show you how to finish off. So there's our square, very close to being finished. I've worked all the way around all 4 sides, and I'm back to the point where I had done the complete first corner. So after my last 3 trebles in the last space, just slip stitch into the top of your first chain 2, and then you can just fasten off as normal. So that is the very first square of the centre section complete now, all round up to round 5. And remember, this is the only square where you will be completing round 5 at this point. I don't want you going ahead and making another 35 squares up to round 5 and then thinking, how do I join them? The join is done in round 5. So the next square that you make, the second square, will be made up as far as round 4, and then you will be attaching it to this square while you're making round 5, and that is all explained in the next video.